everyone, and welcome to another episode of First Impression Sports Talk. For you guys, we're talking all things basketball, and later we will have Cole Brennan on for his segment and his expertise on some of his thoughts in sports. So let's get started.
Welcome to Jasmine Pollock's First Impression Sports Talk, the fastest growing sports talk show in the country. And now, here's your host, Jasmine Pollock.
Welcome back to Jazz's First Impression Sports Talk. To kick the day off, we're going to talk about the LA teams, the NBA LA teams, the Los Angeles Lakers, and the Los Angeles Clippers. So both teams, there's a lot of questions on what these teams, specifically the Lakers, were going to do heading into the trade deadline. So they end up moving on from Russell Westbrook. They trade him to Utah, and then he ends up getting picked up by the Los Angeles Clippers. And both teams have looked very different after they completed their trade. So let's bring in Jeremiah. Let's have this conversation. So Jeremiah, the Battle of LA, Lakers, Clippers. We know the Clippers have been the little brother team for, the longest time. They will always be the little brother team. Then you have the juggernaut Los Angeles Lakers. They need to make some moves, and they end up making some moves, and they're on a 3-game winning streak, And then the Clippers are teetering a little bit. So, Jeremiah, let's talk about the Clippers first and what we've seen since Russell has been with them. We saw them 176 to 175 against the Kings, and the Kings are a scary team, by the way. But what is your thoughts on the Clippers? Do they look better, the worse, or the same?
To me, the Clippers look, I would say, even worse in a sense. Not saying because of the assets that they have. They got some decent assets because to stay afloat and maybe to make playoffs, yes. But when it came to acquiring Russell Westbrook, I just felt like it was an unneeded want. Because at the same time, I felt the same way when the Lakers got him. It was an unneeded want. I feel like for the Clippers, you should have got yourself a natural point guard, like just a regular guy, one that's more of an underdog like you had. Of course, you just got rid of John Wall and, of course, Reggie. But still, at the same time, I felt like you could have went into market and maybe even during the trade deadline, you could have got yourself another great point guard that can be a great asset. When it comes to Russell Westbrook, of course, he's on his best behavior right now. And, of course, he has decent amount of points. But I just don't think it makes a difference for their team and to really improve your team at the end of the day. It just keeps you steady right now because you've seen yesterday's game. They had him on the bench for the whole fourth quarter. So right then and there, of course, he gave you some points early in that game, but at the same time, he causes no factor right now because if you're not going to use him, why do you even have him in the first place? It makes no sense at the end of the day. And for the Clippers right now, they just lost 2 back-to-backs and given up a chunk load of points when it comes to their defense. So I feel like that is a big letdown when it comes to this team because they used to be big on defense. And for these last few games, they just been very slouchy.
Yeah, but that looks like to be the theme of the NBA right now. Our teams really, truly playing defense now because you see all these high-scoring games like that Clippers and Kings game. That game was insane. That was the second highest most scored game besides the All-Star game, which is crazy. In history. So, a score like that, I've never seen a score like that in basketball. So it was like, 170 points. Like, that's crazy. But when it comes to Russ, like what we said before, what we talked about, I'm not going to, keep like repeating it, but Russ is a soldier. He is energetic. He will give you full 110%. But I feel like what the Clippers are trying to do and what they're trying to accomplish, Russell Westbrook is not like the savior to your team. I don't think the Clippers needed anybody to, propel them. You know what I mean? They had a team already. They've had a team for the last few years now that, can still compete. But when you add someone like Russell and then you bench him in the fourth quarter, that's a big problem. That's the guy that you brought in. This is a big name person. And you would expect him to play in a big moment in the fourth quarter like that, but he ends up getting benched. So that's a big problem. But let's go to the other LA team, the Lakers. Now, they moved on from Russ. They were tired of Russ. They said, okay, let's trade him off. Let's get him off our hands. Let's go get some young, good pieces that can score, that can shoot threes, that can play defense. And Jeremiah, what has been the success for the Lakers, and how have they? What has been the key factor of them changing these past 3 games?
Well, for me, I would just say their depth. Not in depth when it comes to superstar status, but depth when it comes to players understanding their roles and actually having those great underdogs on their team.
Mm-hmm.
Like Vanderbilt, also D'Angelo Russell, which was out this last game, but still he's a big factor that was in the last 2 games before the one yesterday. And of course, you had your other as assets too, like Mo Bamba and plus more that they got during that trade.
Vanderbilt.
Yes, and they just have that great fight in them. And right now, as I just seen from these last 3 games, I do like the 2020 Lakers team that they did go in the bubble and win that chip. But as constructed right now, I think that this is the best structured Lakers that I've seen, because from how deep this team is. Now, when it came to the bubble and everything else, of course, they stepped up in a big way, but there was inconsistency when it came to outside of the bubble sometimes when it came to that Lakers team in 2020. But for this team right here, I just see the hunger inside them. Their defense is more railed up, and not to mention, they just have so many assets throughout this whole bench that they carry themselves in a great way. 3-point shooting, as well as guarding, blocking, and most importantly, rebounds. And as long as AD is playing the way that he needs to be playing with, is a monster and takeover, this team can very much go far. And LeBron wouldn't have to do much but try to get others involved and not get himself even more injured. I think the only thing that can hurt this team is only injuries.
Of course, and that's been the question mark majority of the time that this team has been together ever since AD came over there, is the health of the team. I know LeBron, he had an ankle injury yesterday, so hopefully we'll monitor that and see what happens with that. But I said this morning on the radio show that AD is the key piece to this team, because if he's playing like this, getting those rebounds, getting those points, and doing things like that, and be like having those defensive moments that we've known to have him, this team is going to be dangerous. Because how Anthony Davis easily is a top 10, top 5 player when healthy, when playing like this. He's easily, because he is just a matchup nightmare for anyone. Being that big, knowing how to score, knowing how to just play defense at that size. So if he continues to do that, and then you have Mo Bamba and guys that can come in and, give some very serviceable minutes. Like even yesterday, Vanderbilt had 15 rebounds yesterday. That's huge. I mean, we're talking about getting those rebounds, making sure your team gets those second chance points, gets those second chance possessions on defense, getting those rebounds and getting physical on the boards. That's really, really big. So for the Lakers right now, what I'm seeing is very good. Now, they still have a long way to go. There's still things they have to continue to do. But right now, how they've been playing these past 3 games, they've been very, very, very physical. They've been very fast. They have gotten younger, and these guys are making shots and different things like that. But now we're starting to see things starting to come into place. We're starting to get the rhythm, which is good. You're heading into the postseason. You want to look at the Dallas Mavericks. Before we go to break, let's talk about this Dallas Mavericks team. So the question is, Kyrie Irving, Luka Doncic together, how is that going to look? And now they're 1-3. So I don't think it's not Kyrie's fault that this is happening, because I think Kyrie's kind of taking a step back, because we all know this is Luka's team. But it seems like every time I look at, like we talked about, Luka play, I think he's a phenomenal player. He's playing at the highest of level in his young career right now. But my issue is with Luka. Every time I see him play, even the first half of that game yesterday, they're up by a large margin. He's doing this every time to the refs. Every time I see him, he's complaining to the ref. And it's like, all right, why are we still complaining? Like, the game's still going. His team's already down the field trying to reset, or the court to try to reset on defense, and he's complaining to the ref. So, Jeremiah, with this Dallas team, what do you see? What is the future of this Dallas team? Can they go compete for a championship? Can they make it to the Western Conference? Can they be one of the big threats in the West?
To me, I don't really think so. I think they can make playoffs, maybe get to the second round, maybe, or maybe even Western Conference, but I don't have them going further. And that is the reason why, because of the attitude standpoint and growing up in that mentality. Because when getting to that next level, you can't keep worrying about me. Oh, I'm not getting these calls. I'm not doing this. I'm not doing that. You have to play the game at certain points of time. Now, I understand
Mm-hmm.
that certain refs are going to miss certain calls, but
Absolutely.
every single play, you cannot be going to them just having your hands up on why, or you're pounding on the side, or if your player is missing or makes a turnover, you cannot get down on them. One thing I have watched when it came to especially LeBron in his first years with Cleveland, when it comes to Michael Jordan in his first years, there's a whole difference in that team. Although they may not have the best unit around them, or maybe sometimes the players can be off, but they make sure, okay, I'ma just put it on the back myself. I'll keep encouraging as much as I can. But one thing you don't do is out your teammates or do anything like that, especially when you're on the court, making them feel like I don't even want to be out on the court with this guy.
Mm-hmm.
And just like even when it came to last possession with him and Kyrie having that miscommunication on a very crucial play, that has
Yeah.
happened 2 times in their last 3 games, which is really unheard of, because of course you're going to have a sort of sometimes some miscommunication, but really that right there, that is something that, you know, I don't want to keep having so consistently, because for this team, they're going to need both of those guys to be on the same page, and they're going to need both of them to be on the same attitude when it
Yes.
comes to for them to get to the next level. And for Luka, he needs to grow up, and I feel like he needs to do more for the team rather than only doing stuff offensively.
Yes. And I see Jamie's comment here, the Klay Thompson. I think for Dallas, because Dallas is such a young team, and I think they have the potential of getting to a championship in the coming years for sure. But they need a defensive identity for one, and then some, and they need a veteran, Klay Thompson, somebody like that who's a veteran, who's been in big games and big moments. The Luka needs another star player who is a veteran, who's very unselfish and saying, listen, slow down, let's set everything up, let's relax, let's keep our heads in the game. Don't worry about the refs all the time, even though we're not excusing at all the officiating of the NBA, because it is very, very skeptical, or it's a very skeptical thing. But when we look at it, I think he needs to like hone in on the game and stop focusing on the refs so much. Like that's where it's like, okay, Luka, you're that, he's a great player. I'm not taking his talent, but it's the fact that, okay, you're looking at the ref every single day. Like every single game I've seen him play, he's looking at the ref every time. Even when he goes for a layup, looking at the ref every time. But I think for Dallas, they need to go get a veteran guy that has been in big moments, like a Klay Thompson or somebody of that nature, who's been in big games, who's competed at the highest of level, who has some rings, to say, Luka, I've been here, I've done that, chill out, and add that philosophy to it. But I still think Dallas is a playoff team. Obviously, they're going to be around. They're still going to give people headaches because they could score the basketball very well. But that one changed for real. But when we look at it, I just feel like for both LA teams, I think LA teams it feels like they're going to meet up some way, somehow, like in the playoffs. I'm not talking about regular season, but I feel like they're going to meet up for a game series, because I think we're owed that. We haven't seen them in a game, like a series. We've seen them in the regular season playing against each other, but a series, I feel like that's coming. But for the Mavericks, you guys have to mature. You have to get out of your own heads, because, and even for Luka, before we go to break real quick, this is your house. You're in your building, and you're up 24. You gotta ice it. You're the guy. This is your team, Luka. You gotta ice that. You have to say, no, this team is not coming back on my watch. No, we're not giving them any kind of momentum. And when you continue to do particular things, you
Don't
start
pout.
complaining. You start missing shots. You get up in your head. You let a team come back and win like that. So,
Right.
And the Lakers needed that win. They needed something to give them a boost, like especially on the road, and you come back like that. You don't want to give a team like that, let them catch fire like that.
Exactly.
But that wraps up, right. that wraps up this segment. When we come back from the segment, we're going to hear some thoughts and reactions from Cole Brennan. He's going to give his little expertise on some of the topics he has. But when we come back, we're also going to talk about the Iowa State Hawks. Yeah, Caitlin, she is a dominant player, and I'm really excited for her because this Iowa team looks like it's going to be the. We'll be back. We'll talk about it.
I'm Leon Thomas with the Leon Thomas Group. Podcast, virtual events, webinars, streaming shows, and so much more. We want to be your partner in all things virtual.
Welcome back to Jazz's First Impression Sports Talk. If you would like voiceover work done, if you would like to work on your projects, you can contact Leon Thomas at theleonthomasgroup.com. If you'd like to see past episodes of my show and even get in contact and be a guest on my show, you can obviously follow me on Twitter, which is Jazzy-esque, and you can subscribe to my YouTube channel, which is Jasmine's First Impression Sport Talk. So let's bring in Cole. He's going to talk about some of his topics that he has. He has a lot of great topics. So, Cole, you have the floor for 5 to 7 minutes. You go ahead and get started.
2 topics today. They're both very exciting. So, first, the 1980 U.S. Olympic hockey team. They just celebrated their anniversary, I believe, on Wednesday of last week. It was either Wednesday or Thursday of last week, but that is the greatest moment in the history of sports, and it is something that will never, ever be duplicated again. You have to think as to what was going on at that time. The heart of the Cold War, between increased tensions between the United States and the Soviet Union. But then you also just had a hockey game up in Lake Placid, New York, during the 1980 Winter Olympics. U.S. wasn't favored to win. The Soviets were favored to win. They were a team of all professionals. They were playing the NHL All-Stars. They were beating them like 6-2, 7-2. The U.S. really didn't stand a chance, but they somehow beat the Soviets. If you go and you just think to yourself, has there been anything like that in the history of sports? There hasn't. For the U.S. to go and to beat them, yeah, it was a fluke. They shouldn't have won. The Soviets did outplay them. The Soviets were the better team, but they still won. That's why it says in the movie Miracle, it was more than just a hockey game. That, as I said before, that moment in sports will never be duplicated with those events going on in the world between the Cold War, and then also a team of college athletes going and beating professionals. Just can never happen again. Now, moving on to the Penguins. Yikes. They might not make the playoffs. I was able to see the Penguin game live against the Oilers last Thursday night. It was the worst loss I've ever seen live. Hextall has done nothing. Has he woken up from his nap yet? I don't think so. He's been hibernating for the past 8 months. Someone might want to go and, wake up. Spring's around the corner. Trade deadline's a couple days, and he's done nothing. But they waived Kasperi Kapanen, which is just awesome. Kapanen sucks. That whole third line is garbage. Signing Jeff Carter was a big mistake. Hextall needs to obviously lose his job, but it's probably not going to happen until after the season. But, yeah, Penguins are struggling, and we'll see what they do this upcoming Thursday. But if they don't do anything, they're probably not going to make the playoffs. They have to try and find a way to move a little bit of more cap out and try and find a way to get a player. I would still sell because they have done so. You look at these teams like Tampa Bay, they just got Tanner Janot. Now, he's a third, fourth line player. They had to give up a first round pick, like a second round pick, a third round pick. So these teams are getting a lot back in return for third, fourth line players, which is why I think the Penguins should sell, because if they trade Jason Zucker or Jeff Petrie, maybe they get a first or second round pick, and that'd still be really nice. But that's all I got for right now, and I'm going to send it over to Jasmine and Jeremiah.
Well, Cole, thank you for that, spiel about the hockey, because the Lightning, we had to send 5 picks for that player, so I was really excited about that. But the Penguins need to sell. I mean, it's just they came out hot earlier this season, and then I don't know what happened. I genuinely do not know what happened. But thank you, Cole. Thank you for your expertise, and we'll see you next week for more conversation about Pittsburgh sports and other topics. So, Jeremiah, the second topic of the evening, we're talking about Caitlin Clark and this Iowa State Hawkeyes basketball team, women's basketball team. So we sat down and watched 2 top 10 teams battle it out: Indiana Hoosiers, and we're talking women's here, and the Iowa State Hawkeyes. Now, Caitlin Clark, I've seen her before. I've seen people talk about her, but I finally got to sit down and watch her play. And when I tell you that girl is a dog, she is a dog. I mean, she had 34 points yesterday, and she hit the game winner against Indiana. So now Iowa's the 2nd seed in the Big Ten in the NCAA tournament. And I think they're going to be a team to reckon with her playing like that. And they have a lot of good role players that can, score, that can hit threes, that can rebound. This team is going to be dangerous. But Jeremiah, what was your reaction to Caitlin Clark's performance yesterday?
Yeah, when it came to her performance, I think that it was a great one. Because I already said just earlier, when she came off in that first half, when it was almost to halftime, she started to get her stroke going. And I was just saying, as she was coming off of the screen, catching a ball, and she would knock down, and she was like, okay, I'm getting myself a rhythm. And that was bad for the other team, because you was seeing when we was watching the game yesterday, both teams were going back and forth. No team was missing shots. It was like 3-pointers, inside shots. I was like, is anybody, because everybody's playing tough defense, but it was just there. These girls were just shooting lights out. But the difference was how Clark just came in that second half. I just felt like they had no type of answers for her, especially driving in, coming around the screens, and she was just knocking down her shot. I'm not saying she's the same as Curry, but just I can tell that she studies the movements of Curry, going around certain screens and moving with the ball fluently and just letting the ball just stroke. And one thing just about that game where I thought it was incredible, because you would think that, Indiana was going to hold on. But Clark was like, no, I'm taking this game over. I'm
she
knocking
said
that
nope.
down.
She said not in my house, because they were in Iowa. They're playing in Iowa, and they were down by 3 with a few seconds left, and she shot it up, went in, and she iced the game after that. But she is a phenomenal player. And so the backstory was, she used to play basketball against boys growing up. And also when she was in high school, she played against the practice team a lot after they were done practicing. So she used to get that practice playing with the boys and getting physical. So yesterday she was not fazed about who was defending her. And Indiana kept sending so many different defenders on her, and it just did not work. She was passing. She was one of the best passers in the NCAA women's basketball thing ever. She's one of the best passers. And her vision was what set her apart in that game as well, because you have a lot of players that cannot see past, the first line of defenders. She's lobbing it all the way down the court. She's bounce passing. I mean, she did a phenomenal job. And not to mention, she was able to create her own offense. So she could go around the screen, And then she was just going up there. There was 3 Indiana defenders in the paint, and she still went in there and had, and one. She made her layups and just a lot of mid-range. She was all over the place. And when her team needed her the most, she showed up. But I want to say that women's college basketball needs to get a lot more respect than it does, because those girls can play. I mean, when we look at Carolina, obviously South Carolina is the team to beat because they won the championship last year. They've been in the conversation. You look at LSU, you look at Ole Miss, and then you look at Notre Dame. They're the number 1 seed in the ACC conference after Duke losing yesterday. So these girls can play basketball, and I can
definitely.
see, yes, and I can see Caitlin. She's going to be playing for somebody in the WNBA very soon, because she is 34 points. The girl scored 34 points, and she put the team on her back when Indiana, it looked like Indiana had the better team, but Iowa had the better player. And she showed out, and she showed up big in the crowd, and the crowd was in it from start to finish. That crowd was packed. But Jeremiah, let's look at the NCAA right now. March Madness is coming up. I'm really excited about it. What teams are you looking at that you're like, we need to watch out for?
Well, when it comes to the women's, it has to be South Carolina. South Carolina being undefeated right now, being the team that out-rebounds all of their opponents this year alone. And mind you, they're undefeated.
Yep.
So you're talking like 14-0. And they're the top dogs that went. But of course, they won last year. And they lost the year before that one, but they was right there in that championship. This team right here, they have a great coach on their side. She's a great coach for them. And also just dynamic players on their team, big inside players. And not to mention, they just give teams headaches every time they play them.
They can score the 3 and they can rebound. That's in college basketball, that's the recipe. If you can rebound and you can knock down them threes, I mean, you're going to beat everybody, and that's why they're undefeated right now. But Iowa, if Caitlin continues, which I think she will, there's going to be some problems, because this Iowa team looked really good yesterday.
Yeah, and that's one thing about the college rankings. It changes every week, and you got so many contenders. You got your Cinderella stories each and every year for men's and women's.
Yes.
Because even for the men's, in March Madness, there's going to be a Cinderella story. When it comes to women's, a Cinderella story. And that's why you can never look over a team that you're playing, no matter if they're undefeated or if they're the worst team that's entering inside of the tournament.
And I agree with that too, because, well, unfortunately for me, both of the Gators, because I'm a Gators fan, they're not anywhere in the conversation. So I have to find a team that I'm just going to, say, okay, I'm going to rock with this team for the rest of the tournament, because my Gators aren't in. So it's just, well, the Canes, yes, they're going to be in the conversation, but the Gators, we're nowhere to be found. So I'm just, disappointed. So it's just, I'm going to find a team. I like the South Carolina team for the women's. I like Iowa. I'm becoming a Caitlin Clark fan after seeing what she did. And like, I was just sitting down watching her, not just, she's a beast. But that wraps up First Impression Sports Talk. Hopefully we see, what's going to happen with the NCAA tournament. I'm really excited for it. I think it's going to be always going to be competitive. These teams are going to go back and forth. Then, of course, the XFL week 2 kicked off. The Orlando Guardians are guys next Monday for more. We'll be back next time.